Shalom Aleichem, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to the summer learning program. Everybody should know this happens 3 times a week for 8 weeks during the summer. Please come and tell your friends. And also this year we're very lucky because the third time that we're doing this, and the third time Rabbi Braun is coming to address the summer learning program. So it's a Shleish Pa Mahave Chazaka, and Mitzvah Shem next year will be Zoichet to have it in Yerushalayim, Mir HaKodesh, and even before the end of this year. Without further ado, Rabbi Braun.
So my first question is, what do I do to make sure that it's not a chazaka? It reminds me that the Rebbe once told someone asked the Rebbe to give him Chanukah geld. And he told the Rebbe that the Rebbe gave him 2 times already Chanukah geld. So the Rebbe said, that's why I don't want to do a 3rd time, so it shouldn't be a chazaka. So he was very smart, and he told the Rebbe that the Gemara says that according to the opinion of Rabbi, twice is a chazaka. No, according to the Rebbe, twice is a chazaka. So the Rebbe said, I'm going to give you, but I'm going to make a change. Still, so it shouldn't be 3. This time you're going to get it through mosquitoes. And I shall just turn around once, make it twice chazaka. And yeah, we're talking about the halachos of Bein HaMetzarim, the halachos of the 3 weeks. So in halacha, we have a range of categories. We have Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks, which starts on Shivas of the Tammuz. We'll talk about that shortly when it actually starts. We have the 9 days. We have the week of Tisha B'Av. We have Erev Tisha B'Av. We have Tisha B'Av, and the day after Tisha B'Av. Pretty much it. It's hard to sort of, what happens is the halachas, some of the halachas which are problematic, even the issues that we can't do in the 3 weeks, are also issues in the 9 days, but it becomes much more severe. So therefore, in order not to confuse us, we're talking now purely about the 3 weeks. Anything that I'm going to say you're allowed to or you're not allowed to, that means during the 3 weeks. Could be in the 9 days, even when those conditions are met, still it could be a problem. By way of introduction, the concept of the 3 weeks having specific prohibitions is really not that very well sourced. The very first source for the concept of Bein HaMetzarim is a pasuk in Eicha, where the pasuk says, right in the beginning of Eicha, Golsa Yehuda Ma'ini, Yehuda has gone into exile, Loi Matzah Menoach, he couldn't find a place to rest, Kol Roitfer, Hisigua Bein HaMetzarim. All those who chased after the Jewish people were able to catch up to them, caught them, Bein HaMetzarim, while they were standing between the boundaries. A number of different interpretations of what Bein HaMetzarim means, but the literal meaning is they were caught between a rock and a hard place at the edges of the fields, and that's where their enemies captured them. That's the Pashup Pshat. But the Medrash says, in the Medrash Eicha, the Medrash says, Bein HaMetzarim refers to this particular season between Shivas B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Why are we making a season out of this? Now, we know a lot of terrible things happen on Shivas B'Tammuz. We know a lot of terrible things happen on Tisha B'Av. But so do terrible things happen on Tzem Gedalia and many other days in the year. What's this highlighting these 3 weeks? It says, a Medrash, Shebehem Ketiv Meridi Shailit. There's a particular demon which is called Ketiv Meridi. You might be familiar with that. I don't know how familiar we are with demons. I'm talking about demonic demons, not human demons. So we might be familiar with it from Yosef B'Seiser. In Yosef B'Seiser we say, no, help me out. Before that. Somewhere it says the word ketiv there, no? Yeah? Got to sit there over there. I can't move because I'm blocked by this video. Here we go. Thank you. Miketev Yashu Tzaraim. Actually, it talks about Pachyakish, talks about a bunch of different stumbling blocks. Thank you. Ketev is the name of a demon, and this demon is Tzaraim. During the middle of the day, that's when he's at his force. And the Talmid Chacham and the Tzaddikim are protected from these demons. Will protect you. Says the Medrash that particularly from the 4th hour of the day to the 9th hour of the day, that's when there's Ketev Meridi, particularly during the 3 weeks. And that's why our enemies got us. And based on that, it's not a good idea to walk during the 3 weeks, standing bein chamal etzel, between Very hard to understand what that means in the literal sense. Everybody's troubled about this, what that means practically. Not to walk between the area between the sun and the shade. There's no such thing. It's either you're in the sunny area or in the shady area. Presumably it means on the line right between the sun and the shade. That's where the demons are, and that's not a very good time. That's all we know about the 3 weeks in Chazal. That's it. Nothing about any of these other restrictions. The only thing we know is that it's a pasuk, Bein HaMetzarim, the Medrash says, refers to this time, and that's why the one thing that it says, nobody knows about. But it's a dangerous time, and you shouldn't walk it. Okay, fine. A lot of places can talk about this halacha, which is actually brought down in Shulchan Aruch, not to walk between the sun and the shades, and also says you shouldn't hit your students during these days. Also, according to many places, it means during those particular hours. The rest of the hours is perfectly fine to hit him. Assuming that it's fine throughout the year, that is. So the place can say that if the room that has a mezuzah, it's okay, and there's people walking around on the streets, that's all I'm hitting. And people in the street, then it's also okay. It's only if you're makom toyu, only in a place where there's nobody around, and between the sun and the shade, and the fourth hour, the ninth hour. In other words, it's basically almost irrelevant. Let's negate to that halacha. One other thing we find in Chazal about the 3 weeks is a psikta. Psikta is a medrash halacha, not a medrash agada. And a psikta tells us that there's something unique, that during the 3 weeks, the haftarahs change. Normally, the haftarah is associated with the parsha. If you'll have a look in the Rambam, when he brings all the haftarahs, he has a list of all the haftarahs for every parsha linked with the theme of the parsha, including during the 3 weeks. And then he says, but there are places, and that is the common custom, that they actually don't say a particular haftarah, the ones that the Rambam enumerates before that, for Matas Maseh, Pinchas, Matas Maseh, Dvarim, depending on when your 3 weeks are. It's either Pinchas, Matas Maseh, Dvarim, or Matas Maseh, Dvarim. So they have a set of haftarahs, and they're called Thalasa de Peranusa. It starts a sequence of haftarahs, 3 haftarahs associated with Peranusa, with punishment, with negativity, and they're not related with the parsha. They're not Me'ein HaParsha, they're Me'ein HaMu'urid, associated with the theme. Those Thalasa Peranusa are followed also by Shiva de Nechemta, by 7 haftarahs associated with comfort, and afterwards with Trei de Tiyufta. Trei de Tiyufta meaning 2 haftarahs associated with repentance, with Shuvah, the Aseret Shuvah season. And straight until we get to Vazei Sabracha or Hazinu, depending on the setup of the year, we leave the parsha structure and we go into. It's not a thematic haftarah connected with the parsha, but it's the theme of the season of the year. That's all, be all, end all about the halachos of the 3 weeks in Chazal. There's a Gemara in Tainus that tells us a bunch of restrictions. The Gemara in Tainus tells us those restrictions are Shabbos, Shechol, Tisha B'Av, Liyos, B'Soicha. The week of Tisha B'Av, the Mishnah says Mishnichnes of, but then the Gemara continues and explains that the week of Tisha B'Av you can't take haircuts, you can't launder, a bunch of things you can't do in the week of Tisha B'Av. I should say, there's an machlokes in the Gemara, there's an opinion that says in the Navi tells us, the Eibusha says that he's going to bring a churban of the Eden, V'yishbati, Chaga, Chadsha, Shabbato, Moyada. I'm going to destroy their festivals, I'm going to destroy their Shabbos, I'm going to destroy their months. The Eibusha is predicting the misfortune that's going to happen to the Jewish people. So based on that, there are different opinions if how long we keep the Avelis, if it's in the month, Chadsha meaning the month of Av, or is it Shabbat the week of Av, the week of Tisha B'Av. And the halachas is the week of Tisha B'Av. And that's very, very relevant for us to know that a lot of the things that we talk about in the 3 weeks, and even in the 9 days, it's all till you get to the week of Tisha B'Av. And the week of Tisha B'Av, there's not too much room for flexibility, because it's no longer a question of minig, it's a question of Isr min hadin, me'ikr hadin medina de Gemara. Makes no difference, Sfardi, Ashkenazi, African, German, Yemenites. Week of Tisha B'Av is much more serious. But 3 weeks doesn't tell us in the Gemara anything to do. The Sefer Chassidim mentions that Chassidim are Rishonim, great Chassidim. Sefer Chassidim is a book with pious behaviors, and he tells us they were great Chassidim, and they were careful, they were makbid not to make a Shechiyanu during the 3 weeks. And what was their reason? Because how could you say Shechiyanu, V'kimonu, V'giyanu, L'zman hazeh, when the Zman is not exactly such an exciting time? So now we have Sefer Chassidim is much, much later historic. I'm giving you the historical background. It's one of the Rishonim, the Ashkenaz. Can't even call them Rishonim. Kadmonim might be more accurate to use the term. And he mentions this minig, and that's a minig which is brought down afterwards in the later Pesachim Halacha, And that became the minig that we don't, not all the poskim agree with this. The Taz, for example, classic posik, is well, why shouldn't you make Shechianu? Making a bracha to the Eibishter. Well, so what? That this time is not a great time. Obviously not making at the time of the 3 weeks. I'm making a bracha on the new fruit or the new garment. The Gra, others. But the Sefer Chassidim brings this minig, and that's our minig as well. And the minig of almost the whole entire Klal Yisrael. We don't make Shechianu in the 3 weeks. Question is, what about Shabbos? So some poskim say Shabbos for me. Shabbos is a special time. Out of all people, the Arizal, you would think that Kabbalah Chassidus is a bit more easygoing in the 3 weeks. But the Arizal says no, Shabbos also not. And that is indeed the Chabad minig too. No Shechianu in the 3 weeks, including Shabbos. And I mean, there's a lot of poskim stay on Shabbos also. I'll get to this here. And interestingly, a lot of people didn't pay attention to this until the year Tafshin Mem Tes, although it's pretty obvious in Hayom Yom, but I guess you have to know how to read Hayom Yom. In Hayom Yom, it says that there's a minig, you also don't say Shechianu and Sfira. Now that minig is much, much later. That minig, a lot of poskim question and reject and make fun of it and mock it. And there's enough poskim that have a problem with it. Adayam Azeh. But it's our own minig, and it's brought in some svarim. It's not the same as the 3 weeks, which is a Sefer Chassidim, which is Arizal, which is a Magen Avram, which is the regular traditional classic poskim. Sfira, there are poskim that mention, but a lot of poskim actually question. There's a lot of circles where they make a Shechianu and Sfira. In fact, there's a letter of the Rebbe, of the Friedig Rebbe, we wrote to the Rebbe. This came out a couple of years ago. The collection of all the letters of Friedig to the Rebbe. That my father really didn't want to get into this thing of Shechianu and Sfira. He would try getting out of it. Try getting about meaning. It wasn't yet an official meaning, we don't say Shechianu. He would just try to avoid it, that he shouldn't come into such a situation. So in Hayom Yom, both Menhagim are brought, Shechianu and Sfira, and Shechianu the 3 weeks. But with a slight change, and for some reason, I don't know why people didn't pick up this change, because when the Rebbe had a Yechidus, in the year Tafshim Mem Tes, the chief rabbi in Eretz Yisrael, Harav Eliyahu, was by the Rebbe in Yechidus, and the Rebbe addressed its question. He's meeting up with Talmid Chacham, a Chashuv person, and I haven't seen him for such a long time. And his halacha, when you don't see a person for a while, either you make Shechianu, and if it's a longer amount of time, make a bracha, B'chaya Mesim. And the Rebbe questioned why people don't do this. And one of the chief rabbis answered the Rebbe, which I guess wasn't exactly exceptionally clever to say that to the Rebbe, that today's day and age, you don't know if people have the same kind of friendship or love. And here the Rebbe is telling him an expression of fakert, of closeness, and really we should make Shechianu. And he's telling the Rebbe that, yeah, but... So the Rebbe says, Chas v'shalom, maybe the B'cheskes Kashos, for sure, you have to rach kamoicha. It's a good question why that's not the meaning. And they started addressing Shechianu. And they were talking about Shechianu, they started talking about Sfira Somer. So the Rebbe mentioned that minig Chabad is that we don't say Shechianu and Sfira Somer. In contrast to the Sephardi chief rabbi that was here, there was a lot of Sephardim there. And if that's their minig, they should do their minig. And why the Rebbe said it, he said, except for Lag BaOmer and Shabbos. So when it became known, and the Rebbe was Magiyat, the official Chabad minig is that we don't, that Sfira, we don't say Shechianu, but that does not apply to Shabbos. Now, you didn't have to wait till Tafshim Mem Tes, because when you open Hayom Yom, it's obvious, it doesn't say Beferish. When it says Sfira, it says Noigim Shein B'Verchem Shechianu B'Mei Sfira Somer. When it talks about the 3 weeks, it says we don't make Shechianu 3 weeks, V'Afilu B'Shabbos. So it doesn't say that Afilu B'Shabbos. But Beferish, we heard it from the Rebbe Mem Tes, and that's why a lot of people modified and they realize, okay, we got it all wrong. In Sfira, we can make a Shechianu on Shabbos. We're not so frum when it comes to Sfira, when the whole thing is questionable minig to begin with. But when it comes to the 3 weeks, even on Shabbos. Now, someone started asking the question over here. What happens this year when Shavas B'Tammuz is on Shabbos? Shavas B'Tammuz is on Shabbos, the fast gets pushed off to Sunday. Now what happens with Shechianu? That's a machlokes hapaskim. The Magen Avram talks about this too. And some say that according to the Arizal, maybe yeah, and according to the Arizal, maybe not. It's hard to know. You got to be a Kabbalist to work out what would be according to the Arizal. So what's our minig? So I could only tell you, I saw a lot of Chabad publications writing all kind of interesting things, but I could only tell what the Rebbe wrote about this. It's black and white in the Sefer HaManagim. In the Gate of Shechianu, it's in a footnote in the Sefer HaManagim, and it was written by the Rebbe. Shechianu, when Shavas B'Tammuz falls on a Shabbos, and it pushed off, Lo Shamaiti. Lo Shamaiti. I didn't hear anything about this. In other words, the Rebbe said, I didn't receive any tradition, what our opinion is about this. And the Rebbe makes reference to Steichemed, which is an encyclopedia sefer that the Rebbe put out. I mean, not the Rebbe sefer, but it brings all the different opinions. Look what it says in Steichemed, and you'll have your whole range of opinions there. Lo Shemaiti. Now, I can't over here come and say, give you an opinion when the Rebbe says Lo Shemaiti. So I'm not going to form an opinion. I'm just going to say Lo Shemaiti. There is, by the way, an interesting opinion that Steichemed brings. Interesting compromise. But Friday night, yes. Shabbos day, no. So, I mean, because as it is a machlokes if Shavuos B'Tamas starts from the night or from the day. Generally speaking, we assume it starts already from the night. I'm talking now about the halachos of the 3 weeks, not the fasting. I'll talk about that just briefly. Are you allowed to do a wedding the night of Shavuos B'Tamas? Not on Shabbos, obviously. Question. 3 weeks, right? We don't do weddings. We'll get to that momentarily. What about the night of Shavuos B'Tamas? When does it start? Because we only start fasting from the morning. So maybe we only start the 3 weeks from the morning. So this is a machlokes, but the accepted mainstream opinion is that we start everything from the night. And the reason being is because really we would have started the fast from by night also. Like Yom Kippur and like Tisha B'Av. But leiratzu latriach ala tzibur. They didn't want to make life difficult for us. And anyhow, the status of the obligation to fast in a time when it's, even when we're in Gullus, but in a time when we're generally living in a peaceful situation, I'm not sure if now is that time or not, is also questionable, but we have accepted the Chumrah of fasting. But we haven't accepted the Chumrah of fasting, we haven't extended it all the way to starting from a night, not wearing shoes, and all the other things that we do on Yom Kippur. Showers, all those things you're allowed to do on Shavuos B'Tamas. So we haven't, although it says that a Baal Nefesh should keep Shavuos B'Tamas, all the fast days, everything like Yom Kippur. Baal Nefesh is someone who's extremely God-fearing. I don't know too many of such kind of people today. And one of the Achreim writes he hasn't seen any Baal Nefesh practice this, even though the Magen Avraham brings it. So we don't keep Shavuos B'Tamas on by night, but we would have. So since be'etzem, in essence, the fast really, in theory, starts on night, so when it comes to the 3 week restrictions, most poskim assume it starts on by night, and if we don't do weddings the night of Shavuos B'Tamas either. I'll phrase it maybe differently. The reason why all these restrictions apply in the 3 weeks is because it's not an opportune time. It's not an appropriate time. It's a negative omen. So that negative time is there. It has nothing to do with the technical time when we start fasting. It's generally there from the beginning of Shavuos B'Tamas. So the Steichemed brings a particular opinion. If it's both Shabbos, so the fast is pushed off. And it's Friday night, so it's not even the night of, it's on that. No, Sveka, it's a double doubt on a minute. Okay, so then he lets you get away with it. But I'll repeat, the Rebbe just says Lo Shemaiti, so the answer is Lo Shemaiti. So, what do you mean? We started from Shavuos B'Tamas already. No. Here we're talking the beginning of the meaning, not to say Shechianu. Do we wait to start? We don't say Shechianu on any of the Shabbosim. Right? We don't say Shechianu throughout all the Shabbosim. The very first Shabbos this year, because Shavuos B'Tamas, the fast didn't start yet, so maybe the whole entire 3 weeks didn't start yet. The Rebbe actually asked that question in numerous different times not about Shechianu. The Rebbe asked a question about learning Beis Abchira. One of the Rebbe's heroes was to learn Halachos Beis Abchira in the 3 weeks. So if Shavuos B'Tamas falls on Shabbos, when are you supposed to start learning Beis Abchira? Now you could argue and say, okay, so start Shabbos, big deal, what's the Aveda? The Rebbe made a whole question out of this. And some years the Rebbe said it makes no sense to start on Shabbos. The whole reason is the negativity. And some years the Rebbe said, obviously you should learn, you should start already earlier, start on Shabbos. Some years like this, some years like that. In Tafshin and Aleph, which was the last year the Rebbe spoke about this, the Rebbe, that's the one that's most famously known. The Rebbe said a whole entire Chakira in the Sikha, it's Mug in the Sikha. The Rebbe both made fun of him, and he extended that same question all the way to the end of the 3 weeks. In other words, you learn Halachos Beis Abchira all the way till Tisha B'Av, whichever way you're allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av. We're not going into that question. But the concept of learning Beis Abchira, does that apply even on the 10th of Av? Because Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos? Or no, it finishes when the 3 weeks are over. And the Rebbe left it as a question. But interestingly, when they prepared a notice to put, I believe it was in the Allgemeine Journal, the same year when the Rebbe said the Sikha, about learning Halachos Beis Abchira, the Rufin, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whatever, calling of the Rebbe to learn. And they wrote this starting from Shabbos, Shavuos B'Tamas, the Rebbe crossed it out, the Rebbe wrote Sunday, Zuntig. So the Rebbe verbringt on Shabbos, Shavuos B'Tamas, I believe the article is afterwards. It was given, the Rebbe's edit was, I think, Matzah Shabbos or something. In other words, I'm guessing my interpretation, again, I could check the facts. And my interpretation is the Rebbe spoke by Fabreing the Lamdasha, interesting question. But Lamaisa, to go tell people to learn about Bishop Chida because the 3 weeks on the pile, it's not the 3 weeks. The Rebbe didn't want to put that in as an official, formal declaration. Anyhow, that's just an interesting question. Whether it has bearing in Shechianu or not beats me. I don't think it has any bearing. And the answer for Shechianu was Lo Shamaiti. Let's go back to our historical halachos of the halachos in the history setting. So we mentioned that the first source that we have is Shechianu is a Sefer Chassidim. Later poskim started bringing other menhagim. That we don't take haircuts, we don't do weddings, and the Magen Avraham says we also don't do rikudin and mechailus, we also don't do dancing, which is interpreted in a different Magen Avraham when he talks about the 10th of Av to mean music also klei zemer. Some poskim mention over here directly klei zemer. So marriages, haircuts, and dancing and music. I know everybody asks the questions only about music. But that's not accepted in Klal Yisrael. There are many, many places in Klal Yisrael where they follow Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, particularly among Sephardi Jews, and they take haircuts straight until the 9 days or even till the week of Tisha B'Av. That's what it says now. That's the halacha. And some of them even do weddings. In fact, Al Pidin, it's questionable. A person has a mitzvah priviriv, it's a mitzvah d'raisa. So if a person already was married before, wants to marry his second wife, assuming that he's not bound by the Chender Ben Gershom, or he lost his first wife, was Mekayim priviriv, he has a son and a daughter. Okay, so there's no rush. Okay, so don't get married in 3 weeks. But a guy who wasn't married yet, he has a mitzvah d'raisa to get married. Now let's push off a mitzvah. So it's a minig that is being questioned by poskim. It's the same question with Sfira, the same exact question. What do you mean not to do a wedding for Eden? Because the time is not such a good time. Question could be the question, but halach l'maisa, the minig b'poel is that we don't do weddings unless you really need. There's a crazy situation. For example, there was an answer of the Rebbe where shluchim were going to do chuppahs for people that live together for many years together, and they were going to have 10 Russian Jews, whatever it was. They're going to do do many chuppahs all at once, that concept. And they would schedule the date. And the Rebbe, why pushing it for so long? Yeah, because 3 weeks. The Rebbe said, what? Any Rav will tell you could do it even in the 3 weeks, or to have these people living be'isr together without chuppah v'kedushin, because the meaning not doing the 3 weeks, the Rebbe wrote a very sharp response about that. Now, so you have to know, weigh one thing against another. So, but b'chlol is the minig, and we don't play around with the minig. We don't get to do weddings, like I said, and no music and no haircuts. Now let's go through those halachas one at a time. So when it comes to haircuts, according to our minig, like I said, other people don't have this minig. Our minig, I don't mean only Chabad, generally Ashkenazim, and many Sfardim, not all Sfardim. Haircuts apply to the halacha of not taking haircuts, apply to men, apply to women, applies to hair in the head, hair anywhere else in the body. It applies to children. Adults don't give haircuts to children, which is why we don't even do an upsharnish in the 3 weeks. Well, strictly speaking, there would be room to be matter that. Talking about a little kid, there's no availance by a little kid. Now is the time to do it, because now is when you turn 3. But be there as it may, the minig is we push it off until after the 3 weeks, which means normally the 10th of Av after midday. But this year, the 10th of Av is a fast day, because Tisha B'Av is pushed to Sunday. So in this case, Matzah, the fast day is when you do the upsharnish for the child. I don't mean Matzah Tisha B'Av. Matzah the day that we fast Tisha B'Av. Matzah Asiri B'Av. A bit late in the night for a kid to have his upsharnish, but Mitzvah Mashiach will come and we'll be celebrating and partying already from the beginning of the 3 weeks. So everybody will be up the whole time like Hey Tevis. When we talk about not giving haircuts, that includes eyebrows, that includes any other areas in the body, includes the mustache too, unless it's actually disturbing you from eating. So where the mustache is getting in the way of eating, I'm not talking now about the issue that some Chassidim don't cut their mustache at all. That's another whole discussion. But the halach is, if it's ma'akav achila, there's allowed to be done even in the 3 weeks. A woman who wants to cut her hair because of tznius reasons, not fitting well under the sheitel, no problem in the 3 weeks. Again, it's a question of putting things in the right perspective. This is a shaila of tznius, a shaila of a deraisa. And it's a minig. The minig didn't apply to a case where it's stopping mitzvah deraisa. They say that I think it was the Aruch HaShulchan, they say about him, that the maskilim came to him and they told him that, why do you keep on having chumras? You guys have chumras about every single thing. We need a rav, became a rav in our town, come up with good kulas, with good leniencies. So he says, I have a lot of them. I hold, he says, that if a person missed out a day of Sfira, you're allowed to continue counting with the bracha. Okay, what others? This is not what they were looking for. I hold, you're allowed to take a haircut even the 3 weeks if it's Pitznius. One by one, he was giving them his kulas. They said, hey, you know what? Maybe we rather your chumras than your kulas. Same thing, by the way, is a question of chatzitza. A woman who normally cuts her hair before mikvah, even if the mikvah is going to end up being after Tisha B'Av. Because the minig is they don't cut their hair within 3 days of mikvah, because then they might have remaining hair floating around. So they could do that in the 3 weeks also. Even a woman who has bodily hair, which is pashat, looks disgusting, and she's not going to look well in the eyes of her husband, could also do that in the 3 weeks. So all these things is where you push away this minig. A moil who has a hard time, he has to do mitzitza by the bris, and his hair of his beard getting in the way of his mustache, also could be, that's also not a problem. A person who has a chup, has a lot of long hair. I've had this so many times where Moses would call me, the Rav can paskinen as megastan, ken shanayin kum ni yeshiva, but azay for a lange haar. Megastan mitten svira, megastan on the 9th tag, megastan, no problem. Okay, what does that mean, long hair? Something which is exceptionally long, which a lot of poskim say is a question of chatzitza for tefillin. According to many poskim, if a person has long hair, besides, never mind, it's a shayla of chukis hagoyim and many other questions about a blurus, about having long hair, but it's a question of chatzitza. Some poskim say, you're not yotzim mitzvah tefillin. It's actually quite extreme. I saw one someone was 70, and the guy, he had long hair. And some people just don't know better. And you know how it is. Some people, you should approach them, you shouldn't approach them, say something, should not say something. So you always have someone approaching them in the most insensitive way that you have. And the people that are sensitive about it, they don't want to say, because, we have to be tolerant and understanding and accepting, and I don't want to say anything. And I'm thinking the whole time, he looks like such a naive, sincere guy. He probably doesn't know. I went over to him. No, I don't remember what happened. He asked me a question about his film. That's what happened. So I said, can I tell you something? I hope you won't get offended. I really mean something for your own benefit. The general rule is when you tell someone, I hope you won't get offended, they always say, no, I can say anything. Good, I will. So I told him, I just want to point out to you, I suggest that maybe you should put on film again today. I thought you said the film were okay. It's a different thing. I want to show you something. I told him there's a halacha of long hair. It could be a question of chatzitza. Just take a haircut and put on film again. Really, such a thing? Thank you so much. Next day, I saw him in shul with a regular haircut. You just have to know how to say it. I mean, not always we're successful in that. This was a success story. So if a person has a blurus, he has long hair, I'm talking about exceptionally long, which is beyond normal, then yeah, you should take a haircut even in the 3 weeks. A sheitel is not called a haircut. If a woman wants to cut her sheitel, I'm not talking about the 9 days right now, because that is a different set of halachas. In the 3 weeks, it's a garment, a sheitel. It's not here. So if you want to cut and fix the sheitel, that's not called cutting here. That's the reason why you can have the sheitel, because it's not your hair, right? No problem. Next thing we mentioned was the meaning of not getting married in the 3 weeks. So like we said,
I wasn't sure where you could put it.
In the 3 weeks, you're allowed to cut the sheitel. It's not here. It's a garment. It's just playing around, tailoring a garment. That's all it is. So it's not, again, I'm not talking about the 9 days. I don't want to confuse the topics right now when we're talking about the 3 weeks. It's not a problem. It's only about here. Getting married, we said before that the minig is that even if a person was not makayim the mitzvah of piri v'rivia, still we accepted this minig very strongly that we don't, in our circles and in general Ashkenazi circles and many Sephardi circles, not to do weddings in the 3 weeks. Even if a person got divorced and wants to remarry his divorcee, which is a very big mitzvah, still it's not a good omen. We don't do it in the 3 weeks. But that doesn't mean you can't continue Sheva Brachas into the 3 weeks. He did the wedding before the 3 weeks, as long as there's no music and dancing and all that kind of stuff. It also doesn't mean you're not allowed to do a shidduch in the 3 weeks. In fact, strictly speaking, according to halacha, you're allowed to do not only a shidduch, a kiddushin, even on Tisha B'Av. Why? Shemi kadmenu acher. Until such time that you say Heret Mekudesh, she's free to go to wherever she wants. So we're worried Shemi kadmenu acher, maybe someone else will chap around the shidduch. questions how you learn pshat in the Gemara. Shemi kadmenu achim means someone actually take away the shidduch from you, or the Gemara says maybe Shemi kadmenu acher berachimim. Someone else will daven first, and then they'll get the shidduch. So, and it depends if it's a vigrishin, a viksheni. Again, let's not go through the Gemara right now. But we don't practice that. We've accepted that we don't do kiddushin, nisuin, putting on the ring, chuppah, wedding, nothing to do with the meal of the wedding. The etzim getting married in the 3 weeks. But a l'chaim, of art, which is about getting engaged, not only you're allowed to get engaged, you should get engaged. Someone commented, I'm allowed to make a l'chaim in the 3 weeks. I said, you must make a l'chaim in the 3 weeks. I mean, he must make it today, but they obviously can't make it today. You don't push that off. It's a very important thing to do. Including with food and drink and all of that, not a problem. Again, the 9 days, we do a l'chaim, but we tone it down, whatever. We don't make a full meal. That's the 9 days. In the 3 weeks, is not a problem. We mentioned earlier that the Sefer Chassidim brings this minig of not saying Shechiyanu. So there's a second part of that minig, the minig of not saying Shechiyanu, because the negative omen attached to the time, which if you remember the build-up, it started with a medrash that says there's a demon during these days. Based on that, the Sefer Chassidim says, well, if there's demons going around these days, we're not going to say Shechiyanu. So we came in, we don't say Shechiyanu. Which means that if you have a new fruit or a new garment, don't put on a new garment and don't eat a new fruit. Unless a woman that's expecting and she has a craving and she has a new fruit and she has a craving, it's like, okay, so she's invited and she's allowed to eat it. And she wants a shechiyanu. But the minig became from this extend another general minig, because nowadays not too many people make shechiyanu in their clothing. So people could buy new clothing and not make shechiyanu. When do you make a shechiyanu? You buy a new shirt. But the minig became, it's not only shechiyanu, it's shechiyanu because of the words of Zman Hazeh, but also not new clothing because that involves some type of simcha which is not appropriate for the 3 weeks. Even though it's not what it says in the original Sefer Chassidim. But even that minig applies only to chashva, fancy, nice, special, like Shabbos clothing. Simple clothing, like undergarments, socks, or even shoes, which is considered, even though today's day and age it became an industry for itself, is not considered a chashva garment. And are those things you're allowed to buy in the 3 weeks. A talis cotton, a pair of glasses, which is pressure to be able to see, not because you want to get some fancy glasses. But chashva clothing, so we don't say shechiyanu, but in addition to that, we don't buy any chashva clothing. Person needs to have, it's mamish a question of covered abriya, it's covered Shabbos, he doesn't have anything to wear. Okay, so we let him before the Chodesh of, because after the 9 days, it starts a whole new issue. It's not a minig anymore. Then it becomes a much more serious. There's a whole general thing about not buying clothing in the 9 days and putting on new clothing and even laundered clothing. So it's a whole separate issue. But if it's the 3 weeks still and the person mamish needs it, and it's not respectful for him to walk around the way he's walking around, or it's not appropriate for Shabbos, so it's before the Chodesh of, and we tell him, you know what, maybe best, buy it on credit, ask them you could pay afterwards, so it's not considered yours yet. So there's a makan to be makel. Person has a new daughter. The halach is a person has a new son. He makes a bracha teva meter when the son is born, and if he has a new girl, has a daughter born, when he sees his daughter, you make a bracha shechiyanu. That's the halacha. So that you let him make even the 3 weeks. That's the halacha. You're supposed to make shechiyanu on that. Hatoiva meter to begin with is not a problem. So the boy, the issue is only the word shechiyanu kiman uzman hazeh. When you hear that you had a new boy, in fact, it's very interesting. Sefer Chassidim also writes, when a person has a new boy, and the midwife comes to tell him, it's a boy. So before you tell the midwife, thank you for the good news, first say, Baruch atah Hashem kenachem hatoiva meter, thank the Eibishter. Then turn to the midwife and say, thank you very much. It's a bit hard because they think you're nuts. The midwife just gave you the good news, and you just turn around and start talking to the Eibishter. But they get the gist of it. Especially if they've been dealing with from people. My daughter just had a baby boy recently in the hospital. So when she was about to be discharged from the hospital, the midwife tells her, same time, same place next year. they already know what from people are like. Same thing, pidin ben, you're supposed to make shechiyanu when you make a pidin ben, so you don't want to lose out the mitzvah. So you make a shechiyanu even in the 3 weeks. The next thing we mentioned was that the Magen Avraham says, in addition to the fact that you don't do weddings and haircuts, And the Sefer Chassidim says Shechianu, the Magen Avraham adds Rikudin and Mecholos, and we also don't do klizem and music, dancing and music. There's a lot of, this is the one that's very, very difficult for a lot of people. For some odd reason, even though between me and you and the lamppost, not hearing music is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch about a whole year around. In Shulchan Aruch, after it mentions the halachas of the 3 weeks and 9 days, 9 days, Tisha B'Av, all of that, don't bother looking at Shulchan Aruch for the halachas of 3 weeks. There's no section of Shulchan Aruch Dinei Shloishes HaShavos. Because it goes straight into the 9 days, because there was no such thing as the 3 weeks, if you recall what I said. So in the halachas of the 9 days, the Ramah mentions our meaning, no? And if it after finishes all about the 9 days and all the halachas of Tisha B'Av and the halachas of the 10th of Av, right after the section of Shulchan Aruch, the halachas that we have to keep throughout the year is Zeichel Churban. Siman Taf Kuf Samach. And a lot of them people are not very well aware of, and a lot of them people don't want to be aware of, because people don't like negative and sad halachas. And one of the things it says is that you're not supposed to listen to music throughout the year. So it says in Shulchan Aruch. Now, how do we reconcile that with what people do today is a good question, and there's a lot of answers and hatadim, but that's not the subject of the shir. So when people often talk about music in the 3 weeks, music and sfira, and they're like, I can't without it. Hello, you really shouldn't be doing this a whole year. One of the hatadim, for example, is I think it was the Chalkes Yankiv that writes. No, he gives a different svara. Who says the svara? Not the Marsham. I don't want to say names because I forgot who it was. Says that the reason why we're allowed to hear music is because people that are sick, it's for sick people that are not well, a lot of the music. And when people are very, very depressed, it's like being not well. And today's day and age, people need the music because otherwise, you could see it. It's people that are passionate. They go crazy when they don't have music. But that's, throughout the year, there's a tatum. That's a very shvacha heter, honestly. There's some better ones than that. But in the 3 weeks, Churban Beis Hamikdash, Kedai B'Lashon HaPoskim, Kedai Hu Beis Elokeinu, our Beis Hamikdash deserves that, okay, so you're not going to have your classical music that you like so much during these 3 weeks. It's not going to be the end of the world. There are all different types of leniencies because you're not actually listening to the music, you're listening to a recording of the music. So I'm not actually hearing the music, but really, from the straightforward Shulchan Aruch, that's called Klei Zemer. There's no difference if the keli is an organ, or the keli is a guitar, or the keli is a tape recorder, or an MP3 player, or an iPad. That's a Klei Zemer. I should mention that in Talks and Tales, which is a publication that the Rebbe gave out, it was a chassid of Braun Paris who used to kach very much that people should learn Talks and Tales. What's sichos? Talks and Tales. So Talks, or the way it was known in the Yiddish name, Shmusen, we refer to. So over there's simple, basic halachas for simple people, including people that don't know much about Yiddishkeit, the basic halachas of Yom Tovim. And this was edited by the Rebbe, including this section, I know for a fact was edited by the Rebbe because the edits of the Rebbe are there. This gives you the basic halachas of the 3 weeks. And of course it says there, in the drei Wochen, Tarm Nesheren, Kain, Musik. Shouldn't be listening to music, which is basic. If you look back in earlier sources, you find they even talk about, this meaning is not kept, not to sing in the 3 weeks. From Hadeshen, the Chavesiyar, they all talk about such a thing, not to sing in the 3 weeks. So we are questioning the music. Yeah, who says you're not allowed to? It doesn't say befedish. It actually talks about not even singing. So that meaning hasn't been accepted. Baruch Hashem hasn't been accepted. I have to tell you something interesting that by the Rebbe, when the Rebbe would walk into 770, in the late years, they started singing every time the Rebbe came in. They used to not do that, but it was Zusha, whoever was that started this meaning that you should start singing every time the Rebbe comes in. The Rebbe comes like a melech, you should start singing. So always this was the way. You used to sing all the time, except for the 9 days. Even the 3 weeks they would sing, but not in the 9 days. 9 days the Rebbe would walk in, be quiet. In Tafshinun, they started singing. The Rebbe, I think what happened was that the Rebbe started going with his hands. Everybody started singing, so they sang in the 9 days also. But that's verbal singing, not singing through an instrument. If somebody is driving, and people know that when people drive for a very long time, especially at night, there's some serious sakanas nafashos questions. That will be a chassidus shel shtus. The person will say, no music, chas v'shalom. And if the person knows that the only way he's going to stay awake is through music, obviously, not only you're allowed to listen to music, you should be listening to music. It's not even a question. Does it apply in camps also? I don't know. The Shulchan Aruch applies in camps. The Shulchan Aruch applies all over. The purpose of a camp is to mechanech kids to have Yiras Shamayim. A part of Yiras Shamayim is to know the way you're supposed to listen to music, you listen. When you're not supposed to. If you're talking about little kids that are the age of chinuch, and you need to calm them down, and the music is not there for simcha. Okay, beseder, so it's not really asr al pi Shulchan Aruch. That's okay. If a person is listening to an old chassid who has a croaky voice, and he's singing an alter chassidish nigun, and the back, someone who doesn't know how to play music has some background stuff over there, I'm not honestly worried about it. You're not really listening to music, you're listening to a nigun. That's not called music. And even Bem says, even the cell phone rings. You want to be frum and change your cell phone in the 3 weeks to change it to Al Naras Bavel, and you could do that if you really want. It doesn't sound so chassidish. It's okay if it has your regular ringtone. It's a ringtone. It's not called listening to music. Even on the radio, when there's music, my grandfather wrote in his sefer, they're on the radio, you listen to the news and there's music popping up, whatever, that's not what you're trying to listen to. When they put you on hold, you don't want to hear the music. You want the music to be off. If somebody's learning music, so if it's learning for a profession, then you're allowed to learn in the 3 weeks till the Rosh Chodesh Av. But if it's not for a profession, it's time to learn music, you really shouldn't be learning music in the 3 weeks. Sometimes it's not really music what they're learning, they're just learning notes. Bing, whatever, that's not a problem. But if a person is actually really learning music, and it's not for a profession of Parnasa, they shouldn't be doing it in the 3 weeks. And included in the Isra of music is also Rikudin Mechalos. In fact, Rikudin Mechalos says more beferish, not to dance in the 3 weeks. I've seen so many times people come to a simcha, it's more on Sfira. So there's no music, but everybody's dancing. Because you can't have music, but you also can't dance. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch beferish in the Sfira says Rikudin Mechalos. It says, and also not Simchas Yeseiris, which I guess includes music. And the minig is that we forbid dancing even in a Sudas mitzvah, even if it's a bar mitzvah, Simas Sechta, Shevabrach, we don't do music. And Bechlal, when it comes to scheduling events which are not supposed to be in a certain day, a bar mitzvah has a set day when it's supposed to be, right? When it comes to scheduling events like Achnas Sefer Torah, so today there was Achnas Sefer Torah in the community, although the yard side is next week, but next week is the 3 weeks. So the Rebbe writes that you should try to do it in a more appropriate time. But definitely not after the Shchei Shav. That's for sure not. But you get to 3 weeks, you should try it. Yom Zakeh doing it more appropriate. It's just not. Which leads me to the idea that there's a whole range of things which it's not mamash usher, or not even a meaning that you're not allowed to. But b'chlal, it just requires common sense. It's not a very safe time. It's a time which doesn't have a lot of positive omens attached to it. Of course, Baruch the Pnimis, we know, has a lot of holy stuff attached to it. And therefore, we refrain from doing various different dangerous things during the 3 weeks. So we mentioned already that people shouldn't walk alone and walk between the sun and the shade. Remember, we mentioned that's actually brought in Halach and Medrash. But in addition to that, in Yonam of Sakana, anything which says these days are alulim, are having it some type of potential for dangerous results, and therefore people should try to avoid as much as you're supposed to. Generally, al pi halacha, avoid anything which is dangerous. In fact, the only time the Torah tells you v'nishmartem me'oid, you have to be extra careful when it comes to sakana, when it comes to something which is dangerous. But particularly in the 3 weeks, it's not the most positive time to do things that has even a slight aspect of danger attached to it. You're allowed to swim, you're allowed to go in the ocean. Although there was a meaning in many places, they used to always, bathe in the ocean, but in the 3 weeks they wouldn't do it when they had sakana. But again, it's not usr. The isra only starts in the 9 days, and some of the Sfardim don't even keep it in the 9 days. But again, you have to use your common sense. Part of that also is trips. So to say that you're not allowed to take walks and trips in the 3 weeks, you can't say you're not allowed to, because it's no such isra. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch, there's a discussion about taking a tiyul. Tiyul over there means a walk on Erev Tisha B'Av. So if the Ramah talks about taking a tiyul on Erev Tisha B'Av, obviously you're allowed to do it throughout the entire 3 weeks. But again, it's not the time for that. If a person's walking because he needs for his health, or there's a camp, and that's the only way to get these kids to sit and learn Torah and to do their Mishnayos Ba'peh, you take them on trips. The Friedrich Rebbe writes in Likutei Deburim, he describes how it was in Lubavitch, in the city of Lubavitch, and he writes that how from Shavuos until Shabbos Nachamu, people used to have a seder, used to go taking walks every day between Mincha and Ma'ariv. From Pesach to Shavuos, there were no walks. From Shavuos to Tammuz, until Tisha B'Av, there were no walks. That was the break time. And he writes over there in that Sikha, the Friediger writes that in Lubavitch, the Hilchas Tisha B'Av hat agehit mit alle Pratadim. They kept these halachos with all the details, that they didn't take walks, but otherwise used to go and enjoy the summer, spaziert genossen von der gute sommerliche Luft. He used to enjoy the good summer weather. That was the time people used to take walks. Not between Pesach and Shavuos, not between Shavuos and Tisha B'Av, but from Shavuos till Shabbos Nachmu, minus the 3 weeks, that was the time people would take walks. But so this was, I guess, accepted over there in Lubavitch. There's other places that Chaim Palaji brings. There was a takana they made, chas v'shalom, if anybody's going to take these walks, I guess because it was perceived as doing something frivolous. But if it's not done for frivolity, for frivolous reasons, there's nothing really, strictly speaking, that it's usher. And if we're talking about traveling, the Rebbe told many people ask a lot about traveling the 3 weeks. Oh, no, there's nothing that says in Shulchan Aruch now travel in the 3 weeks. It doesn't say now travel in the 9 days. It doesn't say now travel on Tisha B'Av either. It wouldn't be a smart idea to travel when you're fasting. Number one. Number two, especially going on a plane, because there's a lot of concerns of dehydration when people are fasting. A lot of times when people travel, they end up traveling, have to fast double the amount of time, depending which direction you're flying. And if we're talking about a time of sakana, so the 3 weeks is the time of sakana, the week of Tisha B'Av time of sakana, how much more so on Tisha B'Av itself? Yeah, but it doesn't mean you're not allowed to. There are people that have to travel because they have to travel. For whatever reason, they have to travel. But the Rebbe told people often, even like the 3 weeks, they should make sure, the Rebbe instructed people to go on shlichus mitzvah, hafatza yahadas, doing things that the Rebbe wants them to do. They told them, make sure that you prepare for the trip, do significant kind of preparations before the 3 weeks begin. Even like packing up your suitcase or whatever it is, putting a few shmatas in there, so it should be considered that you started your trip before the 3 weeks. Which leads me to a similar topic. People have this chumrah that they don't buy a house in the 3 weeks. Why? Same thing. You buy a house in a time which is an appropriate time. It has a positive omen attached to it. Someone asked me about, they want to know if they can go and move into a new house next week, Monday. I told them, Monday, you're not supposed to move into a new house throughout the entire year. Monday and Wednesday. You don't start a new project, including a new home, on a Monday and a Wednesday. So I said, in addition to that, it happens to be in 3 weeks, but that's not so serious as Monday and Wednesday. So she knows there's good days. I said, what is a good day? I said, Tuesday actually says one of the best days to go into a new home. So can we do it next week, Tuesday? So I said, here's my suggestion to you. Al-Pidin, you're allowed to. It's just not an appropriate omen. But a person is going to a house, is doing it for living. He's not doing it for, like I said, something. He's not buying some investment for simcha. It's a house that the Yidden should be able to have a way to live. And if you don't buy a house, you know what happens in the neighborhood if you don't buy the house now. It's a real shemi kadmenuach. Someone else is going to buy the house and flip it. So, of course, you're allowed to buy the house. But the best is, I said, can you move in technically if you already know, but the moving truck won't be able to come. I said, but can you move in a couple of things just this week? Yeah, for sure. So do that. Take a couple of things, put in your chita, saying it's tzedakah pushka, and your flour, and your bread, and your water, and your picture of the Rebbe. That means you moved in. And the rest, you'll get your moving truck come next week. That's fine. That's considered moving in. So there is such a meaning that people don't go into, there's two aspects. It's not buying a house and not going into a new house. Going into a new house, that says befedish that we don't do that in the 3 weeks, even if you don't make shechianu on it. You try not to go in then, but again, you could try do the going in earlier. And there's also the idea of not buying, which best not to buy then, but sometimes you have no choice, and sometimes you can actually buy now, but it only becomes yours officially later. It's another eitzah. You're allowed to in the 3 weeks, okay? What about renovations, expanding your home? So you're allowed to do renovations, you're allowed to expand your home, make your house bigger, all that kind of stuff. There is some meaning that some people have. You don't start a building project in the 3 weeks. Same idea because it doesn't have a positive omen attached to it. Start before the 3 weeks, of course you're allowed to continue. Again, I'm not talking about in the 9 days, 3 weeks right now. 9 days is much more serious. Light renovations for sure is no problem. Decorating the home especially shouldn't be done in the 3 weeks because that's considered, but stam to do the renovations is fine. And the Chanukas Habayis, obviously, if a person moved in ages ago and now wants to make his Chanukas Habayis, it's not the best, like the Rebbe says about Chanas Sefer Torah. Could choose a better time. It doesn't have to be in the 3 weeks. In addition to everything that we mentioned, of course, there's a lot of the heroes that the Rebbe told us about the 3 weeks. That the pasuk says, that the way to redeem Yerushalayim is by mishpat. Mishpat means Torah. Which means particularly halacha, and through tzedakah. So this is the time we're supposed to increase the limit of Torah and tzedakah. During the 3 weeks themselves, every new stage in the 3 weeks, you add on Torah and tzedakah. So you start right before the 3 weeks. In fact, the Rebbe tells us you should make already on Tezayin of Yahachlata. How are you going to add on Torah and tzedakah? So it'll be Magdim Refu Lamaka. So already on Tezayin, not of Tezayin, Tammuz, just Friday. So it'll be before the 3 weeks already begin. We already established, we made the Achlata, and Eibush knows we already made the Achlata. So it's as if we did it already. And then as the 3 weeks progress, 3 weeks, 9 days, week of Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av, you add an increase in all of that. And if a person didn't start on the right time, okay, so you start later. And that includes doing extra effort in all the Rebbe's Miftzayim during the 3 weeks. And particularly when you get to learning Hilchos Beis HaBechira, which the Rebbe quotes from Medrash Tanchuma, that Yecheskel was told by the Eibishter to go and teach Yidden how the Beis HaMikdash looks. So Yecheskel said, but Banayin Asunim B'Goyla. The Yidden are in Golas. Why am I showing them what the Beis HaMikdash, how the Beis HaMikdash will be like? So Hashem told Yecheskel, and because Yidden are in Golas, Yehei Binyan Beisi Batul, therefore we should put on hold building the Beis HaMikdash. When they learn the Beis HaMikdash, as if they're building it. So the Rebbe takes on this message, it's not as if you're building it. Since the Eibusha told Yecheskel that if I have to teach you that you have to go and teach Hagid Lem as Tachnas, you have to teach the Yidden the plan, because if I don't teach you the plan, what, you're going to put the Beis HaMikdash on hold? Yehei Binyan Beisi Batul, that means by teaching it, it's actually building the Beis HaMikdash. It's just a ruchnisige form of building, which is going to come down eventually in Gashmis. And this the Rebbe stood and pushed in very strong ways to learn Rambam Hilchos Beis HaBechira, Mishnayos, Masechtas Midas, Yecheskel, Kapitel Mem to Mem Gimel. Not only learning Hilchos Beis HaBechira in a way that you want to fix up the problem of the Churban, but actually learning because we know it's Megillah Ma'aseh, because Mashiach is coming and Mitzvah Shem any given moment. In addition to that, in Sifrei Chassidus, they talk a lot about how the 3 weeks are very, very holy days. They're actually holier than any of the other days. They said, I don't know which Pel Rebbe it was, that he said that Mashiach will come, Shavas B'Tams will be Yom Tov, and Tisha B'Av will be Yom Tov. So what will be in between? Bein Amtzarim will be Chol HaMoed. So the other Pel Rebbe told him, nay. Tisha B'Av is going to be the first day. Shavas B'Tams will be the last day, and everything in between will be Chol HaMoed. But that says actually in Svarim, in fact, the Kashmir Samagid writes, and the Tzemach Tzedek brings this down. It's not just a Pelish Sefer, it's actually brought down. It's not a very well-known thing. The Tzemach Tzedek and Eira Torah brings down from the Avedis Yisrael, Parshas Masei, that during the 3 weeks, the king is in the field. You know the Mashal of Melech Basada that we all know about El? He says it, and he actually explains that's pshat in the pasuk. The pasuk says in Eicha Kol Roit Fehi Sigur Bein HaMetzarim that the enemies chased us and caught us. Bein HaMetzarim. He interprets the pasuk differently. That the way to be mastic the Eibishter, to grasp the Eibishter, when can you grasp the Eibishter the most? Bein HaMetzarim. Why? Because now the Eibishter is in Golus. So when the king is in his palace, you can't access him. But in the 3 weeks, he's in Golus. So when the king is traveling, he's in transit, it's much easier, which is what the Baal Shem Tov also says, that it's easier to get Ruach HaKodesh in Golus than in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. The Baal Shem Tov said. Or the way it says in Chassidus that the thirst to the Eibishter is stronger in Golus. Sama Nafshi Be'eretz Siyah, they have a much stronger thirst to the Eibishter in the desert. Came back Kodesh, Halavai, in the time of the Eibishter, we should have the same thing that we have in Golus. So really, these days are really holy days. The problem is that the goodness that exists in these days is not revealed. It's concealed, and that we need to work on revealing it. The closer we get to Mashiach, the more that's coming out stronger. So, for example, Tammuz used to be known as a very negative month. In fact, the word Tammuz is the name of an Avodah Zarah. We know now Tammuz as Chodesh HaGeula, the month of Geula. Yud Beis Tammuz happened, the Rebbe tells us before Shavas B'Tammuz to already be Mahapech Shavas B'Tammuz. And you'll also notice that a lot of these halachas of Havelis and Churban, as on the one hand, right after the Churban started getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and then as we're getting closer to Mashiach, a lot of the later places say, today we'll make a little bit this, we'll lean into this, but lean about that. I'm not suggesting we should be leaning to something that we're supposed to be keep. But the clothes they say about one of the Yismach Moshe, that he used to wear shtraim the whole entire year, except for the 3 weeks, because that's the time of Churban. Later, when he became older, he wore it, including the 3 weeks, but not the 9 days. In the later stage, he wore it even the 9 days, just not on Tisha B'Av, he didn't wear shtraim. He was always like ready for Mashiach. So the Rebbe tells us now, with Mamish standing on Saf HaGula, the threshold of Gula, so the Gemara says that the days of the fast days are called Soim and they're called Sasam Simcha. Because it says the fast is will be Sasan Simcha. So are they Tzayim or are they Sasan? Says the Gemara, it depends on the time. There are times that it's Tzayim, and there are times, even according to Halacha, I mentioned earlier, when it's peaceful times, the significance of fasting is not as strong as in times when it's Tzaddis. So the Rebbe says, as we are longer in Golus and closer to Gula, the Tzayim aspect is becoming less, the Simcha aspect is becoming stronger, and now it's Mamish at the very last moment where there's only a tiny mashal left of the Tzayim, and the Simcha is there very strong. So Levish Elfen, we should be Mekayim the word, the famous word that the Rebbe always calls Matam B'Simcha. We minimize, that's not the simple meaning, we minimize all the negativity through Simcha, that the Simcha should be Mahapach all the 3 weeks, especially that we have this year, the mile that we started on the Shabbos and we finished on the Shabbos, and the Svarim tells that the Shabbosim of the 3 weeks are holier than all the other Shabbosim of the whole entire year. We actually see it right away. When do you read about all the Yom Tovim? Shabbos Pinchas. When you read all about Eretz Yisrael, Pinchas, Matas, Masid, Varam, these are very, very holy weeks, up to Shabbos Chazayim, when it's a Shabbos, when we have the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll be able to mahabach those days, and we'll sit with the Gula Mitzvah Shlem, and everything that you learn now will be just, the way we learn now Hilchas Ela Mashiach, we'll learn then about the halachas that it did in Galus. Take it from Yad Mamash.